Welcome to the weekly distribution team demo. This week I don't really have anything too exciting to bring. I just came back from being gone for quite a while. I'm still catching up with a lot of stuff, but I did want to demonstrate a tool that I have learned about that sort of has some promise and some interesting applications for us. Not all the time, but once in a while for some of our uses. Let me bring up the web page real quick. So it's called vcluster. It's a Go tool that allows you to simulate multiple Kubernetes clusters within a cluster. So I played with it a little bit while I was gone. It is still beta software, and it shows a couple times. It once the great while locks, disconnects from the virtual cluster and has some problems reconnected, but I've only had that happen once or twice in playing with it. I also think I discovered a problem with it last night, which they actually did release a new beta last night. So maybe it's solved, but I'm not going to hold my breath. We'll see. But anyways, let's get into it. So I've got a pretty standard Kubernetes cluster running here. 3 nodes instead of my normal 2, just because I wanted to make it a little bit bigger, bringing up 2 copies of GitLab in it. So that's what we're seeing on the large terminal on the left. And so I'm going to go ahead and start creating clusters. And it's just, actually, I'll start with the bigger window so it's easier to see. Fairly simple command line. There's a create, connect, delete, that's and list. So let's go ahead and create a cluster. Tell it what namespace we want the virtual cluster to be in. Since I was playing with this, I may have, let's take a quick look. I may still have the namespace from one of them last night. No, it's gone. Okay, good. So, and then we give it a cluster name. We'll just call it CL1 also. And what that does is actually spawns off a specific Helm chart. And their parameters allow you to specify if you modify their Helm chart a bit to specify another Helm chart to use, another repo to use, and all that. And as we can see, it's spinning up right now in CL1 a new pod. It takes a moment or two to get going. So that just gets it created. And while we're at it, might as well create the second cluster. I'm sorry, Dimitri, ask that again. You're a little broken up.
Sorry, I'm driving the car. My daughter is asking a question. I forgot to mute myself.
No problem. No problem at all. All right, so we have the first cluster up and the second cluster is starting to come up. Okay, so in order to connect to it, you have to run the connect, but it actually runs as a proxy and creates a kube config for you in a file. So basically, you'll have to have a window where you just have the vcluster running in the background so you can talk to that cluster. So then, and I'm sorry, I forget all the parameters here, but just namespace. Yeah, just namespace. Just call it cube1 for now. About kube config 1, so I don't confuse myself at some point. And so this will start up, and basically do a port forward. There we go. The port forward is now set up. And in order to use it, of course, you need to set typically cube config or integrate it into your existing cube config, but typically you're going to create and destroy them quickly. So I'm going to use pwd to find it just in case I change out of this directory. Okay, at this point, all I see is the one pod that's running the cube system, the core DNS, which is this guy here that's highlighted. And since I haven't changed this one over yet, we look at the original cluster, we just like we're seeing in K9S, we see everything, including the core DNSs and the, lack of a better word, the cube APIs that vcluster creates, the simulated cube APIs. All right, at this point, we can go ahead and start on this first virtual cluster. First, I'm going to create the external DNS. So I don't think I've done a repo update lately, so let me do that real quick. At least not on this machine. All right. It'll take a moment for that to install. And while I'm waiting, I'll go ahead and start connecting to the second cluster. And now I can, let's actually do, okay, so that will install GitLab in the first virtual cluster. And we'll see that start to populate here in a moment. We've connected to the second cluster. We just got to set our variable. Config, there we go. And here on the second cluster, that's interesting. Oh, actually, this is something I had not tried yet. I had not tried using two vClusters at the same time. I kept switching back and forth the other day, or a couple weeks ago when I was playing with this. Let's see what we can find. There's going to be a way of specifying ports. Local ports. There we go. And now we see just the single core DNS there. And we can see now on the full cluster view, the actual cluster, we can see GitLab starting in CL1. But from here, on the virtual cluster, oh, and I forgot to change the namespace. So it installed in default. Okay. Well, in that case, we'll do the same on this side. We won't change the namespace to GitLab. Yeah, I should have changed to the cube system there too, but oh well. All right, so that will start up external DNS for there. Now, I did experiment with this a little bit last night, playing around, trying to get things working a little bit better. And one of the things I did find, which I'm still puzzled about, investigating a little bit, but wonder if it could also be just partly because it's still beta software. If I install GitLab in the original cluster, everything works fine. Comes up, you can get to the instance, and just like we normally do. If you install GitLab in the virtual cluster, everything comes up, looks good, except for Let's Encrypt is not able, but actually the cert manager is not able to get certificates, negotiate certificates for the web services. And what I see is that specifically the ingress controller is having problems getting the endpoints off the ingresses and services. So we'll see if that's still occurring. Actually, by now we should be able to start to see that. Actually, we should be able to see it from the original cluster too. And actually, that's looking better, I think. So maybe this has been fixed. If that's the case, let's give it a try. And while that's running, that doesn't seem to be going anywhere. That's what I was seeing in the output of the Nginx or the ingress controller is, oh, no, we're seeing the same thing. Here we go. We're starting to see the errors right here. Error obtaining endpoints, which I haven't quite figured out, because if you look at the endpoints, everything's looking good. If you look at the service or the ingress, everything looks good. So there's something there. One of the things I did notice is it seemed to have wrong names for the Let's Encrypt HTTP solver, so that the unique IDs at the end here were different. Whoops. So logs, come on. So we can look at that here in a moment, see if that's still occurring. Actually, UFS and SHJ. Yeah, so for some reason, the those pods are either rotating or somewhere that's getting bad information. I don't know why that's the case yet. So unfortunately, at this point, getting GitLab up and running inside the virtual cluster is not working so well. But it's getting close, it seems like. So from what I've seen, the vCluster just manipulates the name of the pod to encode the namespace and things like that for the virtual cluster. And there we go, that's running. We'll start popping up here in a second. And where I see this really being useful is things, at least at this point, given and I haven't tried a whole lot of things yet. Where I see this being really useful is bring up GitLab in your normal cluster and then create a virtual cluster if you want to create the scenario of using something like GitLab Runner or CAS or something like that in a separate cluster. Or you want to create an environment where you have 4 different clusters without having to go create 4 separate clusters and then have a variety of the agents and so forth running in different clusters and testing the being able to connect across clusters. I sort of was envisioning this for Geo, where you could create 2 or 3 clusters and try to get Geo up and running without having to go hassle and create multiple clusters and the extra expense of the extra clusters and so forth. But since GitLab's having an issue running at this point inside the virtual cluster, that's not too, yeah, I was getting this last night quite a bit because it's not getting a certificate. So we could try, and it's not getting there. We could certainly do a port forward and probably get it up and running, just ignore the certificate, but that's sort of a stopping block. Yeah, go ahead.
So why not the self-signed? Why did you need to stick with the Let's Encrypt?
Mostly because I just have the environments usually getting Let's Encrypt. In theory, self-sign would work probably just fine. So that would be a good experiment. But that's really sort of what I want to demonstrate is that the vCluster, just throw it out there and let people think about that for a bit and see if there's any other interesting uses for something like this, where we instead of creating multiple clusters, we can create clusters quickly on the fly within a cluster. So, and here we're looking at a virtual cluster. It looks like a normal installation without the additional all the encoded data that vCluster puts on it. So vCluster is giving us a cluster view.
So crazy question. If you pop into, say, Task Runner, since it's not falling over, what does its internal name look like? So if you pop into it, we'll see what its host name is according to itself. Okay, so it is kind of what I would expect. It's just one of those, when we do the layers of the layers of the layers, all I hear is Yodog. So I kind of wonder what's going on,
Yeah, I mean, for what I'm seeing, it seems to be pretty good. I'm still a little puzzled. I might try to get a bug report just created, see if the developers have seen this or know about this issue of having problems seeing the endpoints. Again, I don't know if that's just the way Ingress is looking at stuff and trying to parse through data, or I mean, ideally it should be just doing a Kubernetes API call that just says, give me the ingresses, and it should come back correctly. So is it that vCluster is not representing the API call correctly and given something that the ingress doesn't like? I don't know yet. I'm not sure I'm gonna spend the time to really dig into it to that level. It looks like a useful tool, but I haven't really delved into it to where I'm gonna go, yeah, let's go spend a couple hours digging through this and figuring it out.
So I looked quickly at something and I noticed that so vCluster makes use of K3S to run its API. Well, it's actually an API server, but we'll call it emulation for the sake of understanding separation.
Yep.
So the hilarity is that you could be making use of K3S and then run this in it. You've got K3S in K3S, and then if you turn around and use kubevert, you could be running K3S and K3S and K3S.
Yes. Uh, so that's not all I had. I just wanted to sort of show the demonstration, show that it is mostly functional and coming up, and that you can have a couple emulated Kubernetes clusters running. It doesn't do any, if you're looking to do any testing where you need some latency between the clusters to simulate a geographic distance, yeah, it won't do that. You'll still have to create multiple clusters for that, but otherwise I'm seeing it reasonably good. And I'm hoping that when they do get beyond beta, some of these issues will be solved. So, by the way, if you, I wrote last night the ASDF plugin for vCluster, and it actually got accepted earlier this morning. So if you want to play with this, you can just bring it in through ASDF. So anything else or any other questions people have got?
Just a comment that, yeah, the economics make sense, right?
Yeah, I mean,
I can see why someone would be interested in this.
It's not going to like cut our costs in half or anything, but if you're doing something where you need a couple clusters, it can save a couple nodes. Like right now I'm running on 3 nodes, which it's actually pretty reasonable on 3 nodes. If I were to go back to my normal 2 nodes and try to run 2 instances of GitLab, I start to get a little bit uglier, but I think that's sort of doable. It's just going to be wicked slow and may see some pods faulting once in a while for memory issues. But yeah, it keeps me from having to bring up another node or 2 for multiple clusters. So, all right, I think that's it. I don't have anything else unless someone has any other questions.
Don't have any other questions. I have a crazy thought though.
Go ahead.
We should try deploying this into OCP.
I've thought about that a couple of weeks ago when I started playing with this. Could we use it in OCP to create multiple OpenShift, or not, I don't think they're to the level really gave fully to OpenShift yet, but because K3S doesn't really support all the OpenShift pieces yet, but it would be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, no, I bring it up because then we wouldn't need necessarily a separate actual cluster to do native vanilla Kates. If this can run inside of OCP, yes, it's not OpenShift. That's not what I'm looking for. K3S implements vanilla. Then we would not need a separate CI cluster just to do the one-off vanilla Kates testing for the operator work.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. I would love to see it. I would love to see, again, I don't know how they're doing the API stuff other than just some of the transformation on the pod name and all the other object names to hide stuff. But it would be really interesting if there's passing everything through so you could actually inside an OpenShift run a virtual OpenShift, because then we could basically have an OpenShift cluster out there that a bunch of us are using, that just we create our own virtual OpenShift cluster to do some testing without having to wait for an OpenShift cluster to start up.
Agreed. Knowing Rancher and the K3S folks as I do, that's not going to happen anytime soon, but maybe they can find somebody who will pick that up on the Red Hat side.
Yeah. Anyways, crazy thoughts, but yeah, no.
Yeah, we'll have to follow this and see kind of where the project goes.
Yeah. I saw it announced probably about 4 weeks ago. I don't know what version of code I was actually playing with at the time. But as I said, I wrote the ASDF plugin last night with beta 2, the 0.30 beta 2 installation, and did testing on that. And then this morning I woke up and there's a beta 3 now. So Not saying that they're iterating really fast, but they are at least still working on the code and pushing it forward. So hopefully we'll see a full release here soon, and maybe a little bit more stability and a little bit more support for some of the objects. But yeah.
Very cool. I think that gets us right up just about to time.
Oh yeah.
Not to cut anyone off, but feels like we're at a good spot.
So again, that's loft-sh vcluster, or loft-sh vcluster. If you want to go look at that. Oh, and I just realized I didn't put anything in the notes. I'll go put some notes in the document and put that link in there and so forth. Forgot to do
Gotcha. I
that.
think some of us got those, so you can take a look. But
Okay.
I think we've got most of the, at least the links and whatnot in there.
All right. Sounds good.
Thanks,
We'll see
Gerard. Have a good one.